Today is June 29th, 2018, and the title of this talk is Guided, Protected, and Loved, a quest for truth led to unconditional love and inner peace. So we're going to be talking a lot about the stuff that I've experienced in my own life, as well as how it jives with some of the ancient masters, some of the modern teachers, how it aligns with this map of the universe as I've basically seen it in my head. This is what I call the master plan. If anybody is unfamiliar with it, there's another talk that I gave where I talk about the master plan. I jokingly refer to it as God's plan because that's essentially what it is. It's the act of creation and how everything is put together. So I will go into this a little bit as well, and then we're going to discuss this and how it relates to you, and how that makes, how that allows you to come into this world as a creative being and understand your creative power. One of the things that I see in the world is that people are so completely unaware of who they really are and what their intrinsic power is that they tend to limit themselves. So we're going to talk a lot about how we can understand what our true power is and what our creative power is, and potentially even move forward into a more powerful, productive, positive world. When I look at the world today, a lot of what I see is everything being created out of the ego. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Ego, I'll talk a lot today about love versus ego. And I don't think that the ego is a bad thing. I don't see anything as good or bad anymore. It can be a very powerful force that can create a lot of great things. You can see all our skyscrapers and our roads and all the systems of governance and all that sort of stuff are created out of the ego, which is good to a point, but we also want to make sure that we temper that and we understand what the drawbacks are to that and how we can move towards a more loving nature. One of the things that I want to talk about today is what I, again, jokingly refer to as the formula for world peace, which I think, honestly, if everybody were to adopt it, it could end up in world peace. But that's certainly not going to happen. I don't expect anything out of this other than, if you get something out of it, great. If you don't, then that's great too. Now, so let's start with this. If you've never seen this before, and some of you have and some of you haven't. So this is basically what, as a brief overview, there's more in my last talk if you want to watch it. It's up on YouTube. And that one was called the Master Plan. This one is called Guided, Protected, and Loved. So basically what I was doing, I had a bit of I went on a bit of a spiritual journey when I started meditating. I started moving into deeper realms of consciousness. And I started having epiphanies, and I started having these spiritual moments where I was starting to connect with my inner self. And that led me to a bunch of different books and teachers and stuff that I've talked about again in my last talk. And one of the things that, with me, I like to have a bit of a scientific mind as much as I can. So I like to try and test things as much as I can. I am not the type of person who just accepts something as gospel, who just says, well, somebody says it, so therefore it must be true. So I want to try and figure out exactly how I can put things to the test to see whether they're true or not. Now, one of the major things that I did, which was a pretty massive spiritual awakening for me, was I trained myself to have conscious out-of-body experiences. And I don't do it anymore because I don't really see the point. I've got the evidence that I need, and that's fine. But on 5 different occasions, I was able to leave my body, and so it's a fairly obvious experience when your body is down on the bed and you're up floating in the air, or you're sitting. One time I was sitting in meditation. So I was, cross-legged on the floor. I went out of my body. It's not something that I generally entirely control. It's something that just sort of happens. With more effort and control, I could probably control it to some degree. But I really don't see the point in doing that anymore. I don't really need too. So what that led me to understand was that, well, clearly I'm not the body. So what the spiritualists have been saying, that you are not the body, is accurate. Because if my body is down there on the bed, and my consciousness and my thoughts and my personality and all of that is floating out, up in the room or out the wall, or like right through the wall and all that sort of stuff, there is a separate part of you that is conscious, that is not the body. So what we have to do is we have to start figuring out exactly how we can know what is real and what isn't. Now, if you ask a scientist, I remember listening to an interview with Bill Nye, and somebody posed him the question, is it possible that consciousness is a field that exists outside of the brain? And his simple answer was no, right? There's people who do psychic research, and it's very hard to get published in medical journals or scientific journals because of the stigma that it has. And there is mountains of evidence that it's real, but the scientific establishment says that it doesn't. So what I really want to do is I want to cut through a lot of the dogma, whether it's religious, spiritual, or scientific dogma, and just say, like, look, let's figure this out, right? When we go through life, we need to know what is accurate and what isn't. And if you have a dogmatic line of thought that you're holding on to that says this is real and everything else is false, that is ego 101. So what I'm trying to do is I'm going to try and get you guys out of the ego a little bit, and get you out of the dogma. So if you have any dogmatic thought processes, I always say leave your dogma at the door. I was an atheist for 42 years. Now I have a better understanding of the spiritual universe, so I'm very comfortable using the word God. I refer to it as God. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it the universe, consciousness, collective consciousness, whatever you want to call it. But there is an essence there that is not talked about or accepted by modern science. So we're going to go into some of that stuff, and I'm going to confront some things head on that I think need to be discussed, and I don't have any religious affiliation or any scientific affiliation, so I really don't care what other people say about me. So anyway, what I found through going through this, when I found out that you could actively leave the body if you wanted to, that there's more to the universe definitively than just what is in the physical. So once I was like, okay, let's move out of the physical, and let's look at the people who have gone out of the body, and let's see what they have to say. Because now I know that these experiences are real, I don't have the time or the wherewithal to really explore that arena on my own. I want to see what other people have to say, and see if that matches with anything. And so what I discovered is that there's a book called Journeys Out of the Body by a guy named Robert Monroe, who runs the Monroe Institute now, where he spontaneously started having these out-of-body experiences. And he writes in depth about some of his experiences and some of the entities that he encountered while he was doing it, some light and some dark. He would run into his father and talk to him very briefly, and he would go into higher realms and lower realms and all this sort of stuff. And one of the most significant passages in the book is a passage that I'm actually going to read verbatim, because this is a fairly significant passage in that it explains something that I had never encountered before, and I think it's something that is very, very important in relationship to this. And when I heard this passage, because I was listening to the audiobook, it filled out this map perfectly. And this is what he writes. He writes, 3 times I have gone to a place that I cannot find words to describe accurately. Again, it is this vision, this interpretation, the temporary visitation to this place or state of being that brings the message that we have heard so often throughout the history of man. I am sure that this may be part of the ultimate heaven as our religions conceive it. It must also be the nirvana, the spiritual experience related to us by the mystics of the ages. It is truly a state of being very likely interpreted by the individual in many different ways. To me, it was a place or condition of pure peace, yet exquisite emotion. It was as if you were floating in warm, soft clouds where there is no up or down, where nothing exists as a separate piece of matter. The warmth is not merely around you, it is of you and through you. Your perception is dazzled and overwhelmed by the perfect environment. The cloud in which you float is swept by rays of light in shapes and hues that are constantly changing, and each is good. As you bathe in them as they pass over you, ruby red rays of light are something beyond what we know as light, because no light ever felt this meaningful. All the colors of the spectrum come and go constantly, never harshly, and each brings a different soothing or restful happiness. It is as if you are within and part of the clouds surrounding an eternally glowing sunset. With every changing pattern of living color, you also change. You respond and drink into you the eternity of the blues, yellows, greens, and reds, and the complexity of the intermediates. All are familiar to you. This is where you belong. This is home. As you move slowly and effortlessly through the cloud, there is music around you. It is not something of which you become aware. It is there all the time, and you vibrate in harmony with the music. Again, this is more than the music you knew back there, in the physical. It is only those harmonies, the delicate and dynamic melodic passages, the multi-voiced counterpoint, the poignant overtones. It is only those that have evoked in you the deep, incoherent emotion back there. The mundane is missing. Choirs of human-sounding voices echo in wordless song. Infinite passages of strings in all shades of subtle harmony interweave in cyclical yet developing themes, and you resonate with them. There is no source from which the music comes. It is there, all around you, in you. You are part of it, and it is you. It is the purity of a truth of which you have had only a glimpse. This is the feast, and the tiny tidbits you have tasted before, back there, had made you hope for the existence of the whole. The nameless emotion, longing, nostalgia, sense of destiny that you felt back there when you stared at the cloud-layered sunset in Hawaii, when you stood quietly among the tall waving trees in the silent forest, when a musical selection, passage, or song recalled memories from the past, or brought forth a longing for which there was no associated memory, when you longed for the place where you belonged, whether city, town, country, nation, or family. These are now fulfilled. You are home. You are where you belong, where you always should have been. More importantly, you are not alone. With you, beside you, interlocked in you, are others. They do not have names, nor are you aware of them as shapes, but you know them, and you are bonded to them with a great single knowledge. They are exactly like you. They are you, and like you, they are home. You feel with them, like gentle waves of electricity passing between you, a completeness of love, of which all the facets you've experienced are but segments and incomplete portions. Only here the emotion is without need of intense display or demonstration. You give and receive as an automatic action with no deliberate effort. It is not something you need or that needs you. The reaching out is gone. The interchange flows naturally. You are unaware of differences in sex. You yourself, as part of the whole, are both male and female, positive and negative, electron and proton. Man, woman, love moves to you and from you. Parent, child, sibling, idol and ideal all interplay in soft waves about you, in you, and through you. You are in perfect balance because you are where you belong. You are home. Within all of this, yet not a part of it, you are aware of the source of the entire span of your existence, of you, of the vastness beyond your ability to perceive and or imagine. Here, you know and easily accept the acceptance of the Father, your true Father, the creator of all that is or was. You are one of his countless creations. How or why, you do not know. This is not important. You are simply happy because you are in your right place where you truly belong. Each of the 3 times I went there, I did not return voluntarily. I came back sadly, reluctantly. Someone helped me return. Each time after I returned, I suffered intense nostalgia and loneliness for days. I felt as an alien might amongst strangers, where things were not right, where everything was so different and so wrong compared to where you belong. Acute loneliness, nostalgia, and something akin to homesickness. So great was it that I have not tried to go there again. That, when I heard that, that was the filling out of this. That is the best description of the soul's reality that I can ever imagine. Okay? What we're dealing with here is a change in vibration. That's all this is. God creates the soul creates the mind creates the body. All three of those are in separate realms. God is the whole kit and caboodle of all of it. There's no separation between any of this. I draw lines on there so that you understand what is going on. Okay? So if you want to think of it another way, okay, let's go back, okay, and think about what it's like to be God for a minute, okay? Now, God is everything. Everything that ever is, ever was, or ever will be. It's the sum total of everything. There's no physical incarnation of God that we know about. Anything that we think of as a concept is lesser than the whole. If I tell you that God is everything, you automatically start to think that, well, God is this, and then there's space outside of it. There's nothing outside of God. There is no space outside of God. God is formless because in order to have a form, you have to have an outside. There is no outside of God. Okay? So, God is the energy that creates everything, which is a creative force, the living force of the universe. And we are a part of that. Okay? So, let's go back to the beginning, and all there is God. Okay? So, God is sitting there, to personify him a little bit. God is sitting there wondering who he is. God is consciousness. Ask the same questions that we ask. Who am I? What am I doing here? What's the meaning of all of this? Those are the great questions of history. Things that philosophers have been asking for, hundreds of years, if not thousands. Okay? So God says to himself, I am everything there is. And he says, but how do I really know that? How do I know I am all that is? So in order for him to understand what all of it is, he has to know what less than that is. Okay? So God creates, or splits himself into separate pieces. All part of the whole, all still, separate and individualized, but still part of the whole. Okay? Then God said, the soul says to God, what am I? And God says, you are me. I am you. You're one. Right? And then the soul says, I get it. I understand. I am part of you. I am part of the whole. I'm part of the magnificent whole that is God. And the soul says, what else am I? God says, you are love. The soul says, what's love? God says, well, in order to understand that, like me separating myself into you, to know the separate parts and the whole, if you want to know love, you have to know the opposite of love. Well, what's that? Well, let's create together. We'll create the mind. And the mind can choose between love and fear. Fear is the opposite of love. So they create the mind. And the mind says, who am I? And the soul says, you are love. And it says, how do I know that? I'm trapped in this dark space of fear. It says, well, you know because we tell you. And so the mind says, oh, okay. Well, what else am I? It says, well, you're anything you want to be. You're all of it. You're the up and the down, the left and the right. You are a creator like we are. We can do whatever we want. And the mind says, I still don't quite understand, right? And it says, and the soul says, okay, well, what will the God and the soul say, let's create some more. We'll create this place called the physical, where we can go and we can explore, and we can explore everything we want to. We can explore the up and the down, and the left and the right, and the good and the bad. We can explore love and fear, It'll be a great dualistic experience, that we can experience anything we want. Yes?
So mind was not physical still?
No, the mind is not physical. The mind is non-physical. Okay? Separate from the brain. So the mind says, well, that's great, but when I was created, I felt this great fear, this great separation from you. I didn't know what that was. He says, what happens if I go into the physical and I can't remember? And I can't remember who I am, and I get trapped in fear, and I don't know what to do. And the soul says, well, then we will continue to talk to you. We will tell you, we will remind you of who you are. And the mind says, well, what happens if I get so lost in the duality I can't remember, and I can't hear your voice? And it says, then we'll send messengers. We'll send messengers in all ages and all times and on all worlds. And you will know my messengers because they will have only one goal, which is to remind you of who you really are. And you can play and you can experience anything you want, and you can always return home. The biblical story of the prodigal son is the story of somebody coming home and being welcomed. Because you are always welcome. You can play as long as you want in the physical. You can do whatever you want. But when you get tired of it, when you seek more, you can always return home. And returning home is simply nothing more than awareness. It's not some heaven or nirvana or whatever, paradise, whatever you want to call it. It's not a place you go. It's a place you are. It's a reminder of who you really are. So when I design this, I always create it from the top down, because God creates the soul creates the mind creates the body, right? So the description I gave you of the spiritual from the book Journeys Out of the Body, which you walked in on, so you can watch the video later and read the whole thing. That's as accurate a description as I can get for that. Now, in terms of the mind is non-physical, again, separate from the brain. There is, when you talk to anybody like Robert Monroe, by the way, Robert Monroe is not the only one who writes about the experience of the true self. He didn't know what it was. I recognized it instantly. He didn't know what it was, but other people recognize the same thing. They describe it in similar ways. If you train yourself, as I did, to have a conscious out-of-body experience, this is a creative energy right here. Okay? This is creative and non-physical, and through your intent, you can create almost whatever you want. So what a lot of people will do if they train themselves to have a non-physical experience is they simply go into the non-physical and they say, show me my true self. I want to see my true self. And through intent and focus, they are shown and they experience that for themselves. Many people have done it. The problem is people don't talk about it because it's weird. And people think that you're crazy because it's experiential. Okay? Now, so this is a non-physical reality. It's an actual reality, separate from the spiritual reality and the physical reality, except everything is contained. It's a state of vibration. God's vibration is very fast and very powerful. And as the vibrational energy slows down, it condenses and becomes more and more solid. That's all this is. When you leave the physical body and you have a non-physical experience, that is where all the creation is done. The general idea is that the mind or the soul conceives, the mind creates, the body experiences. The mind is where all the blueprints are held. The mistake that Robert Monroe made is that he refers to the astral body as the second body. The second body is actually the first body, and the first body is the second body. Okay, your astral form. This has a light body, that has an astral body, that has a physical body. They are all governed by different laws. Okay, we're going to go over some of those. This is a thought-created reality. Anybody who tells you, who goes into this realm, will tell you, like energy attracts like energy. Okay, one stray thought will send you zinging across the universe, the spiritual universe, the metaphysical universe. Right? You got to be very, very careful when you go in there. There is also an angelic realm and a demonic realm. Okay, again, stages of vibration. People who, you know, people in the physical world who vibrate with a very low energy. Okay, they're very dark people. You don't want to be around them, right? I'm talking just in general terms, drug dealers, drug dealers and rapists and criminals and, you know, that sort of stuff. Those are the people that have that dark energy in the physical. There's also angelic people in the physical, people who vibrate with a very high level of love and high vibrational energy. And those people make you happy to be around them. You can feel their energy. Every woman who has ever been around men knows instantly whether the guy is creepy or not. You don't even really need to know much about them. You can get a sense off of them. You feel their energy. We are constantly radiating energy. So this process right here is an outside-in process. Okay? It's a slowing down of energy until it becomes material. So there's a lot of us. Most of us is non-physical. And all of that non-physical energy is interacting right now between all of us. There's no separation between all of it. Okay? It's kind of like if you have, you know, a steam room, and you have your little thing in the corner that produces all the steam, and your little bench that people sit on. And you say, well, there's the steam in the upper corner, there's a steam in the upper corner, there's a steam down near the bottom, and there's that steam right there, right? Yeah, you can point to it and say this is this and this is that and that's that, but it's all the same steam, right? It's all intermixing with each other, right? So there's no separation between any of it because you can't separate it fully. You can individualize it and you can say this is the steam on the upper right hand side and this is the steam on the upper left hand side. But it's just a generality, it's just a way for us to think of things. But then, you know, you also have, you know, if you want to really understand vibration, this is my drawing, okay? It's exactly like looking at water, okay? Low vibration turns solid into ice, right? When you slow the vibrational energy down of the molecules in the water, it becomes ice, okay? As you excite the particles in the ice, they move around a lot, they move around a lot more, and it melts and becomes water. You excite the particles even more, it becomes steam, right? That's all this is, just in terms of a much larger, more powerful energy. You're just transitioning from one to the other. This is no worse than this, okay? This is great for powering a locomotive. This is great if you want a cold drink in the summertime, right? It's not good or bad. It just is what it is. So when you go into the non-physical and there's demonic entities, it's the same as the physical energy. It's just this is a thought-created reality. So the forms, the physical forms that they take or non-physical forms that they take can be quite frightening if you go in there. So I don't recommend going in there if you're going to have a low vibrational energy. I'm not recommending you do what I did and try and have conscious out-of-body experiences or not, right? I don't care either way. I'm saying if you're going to do that, it's like going into a really dark area of town in the middle of the night. You know, it can be scary. So you want to watch out. You want to do it in the light. You want to do it in the daytime. You got to prepare yourself, okay? This is all I'm saying. None of this is good or bad. This is what it is. It's like gravity. Gravity is neither good nor bad. It's morally neutral, right? It is what it is. But basically, what we're dealing with, pardon me, is trying to understand how this whole system works. This is the physical playground. When I create this, I always say I go from the top down, right? Realistically, that's how it should be. Because the physical is where we choose to come into. All of the non-physical is here to support this. Okay? Our journeys into the physical are done by choice, and they're done with the support of the non-physical. Okay? And we know that because we can experience it whenever we want. It's very simple. You ask for signs. You ask the metaphysical for help. There are angels, there are guides, there are people who will help you out. There is, in the book Journeys Out of the Body, he talks about a lot of the little demonic entities he meets, and a lot of the more angelic entities. And he talks a lot about the guides. When he's trying to get somewhere, he sets his intent, and usually what will happen is he'll feel a set of hands, pick him up underneath the shoulders, and fly him wherever he needs to go. Right? And then if he's having problems, if there was one situation where he was trying to get back into his body, and he ran into a wall that in the metaphysical that he couldn't get past. He didn't know how to get past it. And he received an insight that reminded him of how to deal with the wall so he could get past it. Right? There are guides who will help you out. There's once where he was having some problems with some non-physical entities which were very dark, and they were attacking him. He talks about knockdown, drag-out fights where he's like, he doesn't even realize he's non-physical until he gets thrown through a wall. And he's like, oh, right, yeah. Right? So these little demonic entities that are kind of attacking him, he doesn't know how to deal with, and he's very, very scared. And then a guide comes into where he is and picks up one of the children and just caresses, or children, he calls them, I think, childlike entities, because they were smaller, they weren't like full-size. And he just caresses them, and the entity just goes, right? Because they're trying to help you, they're trying to guide you, they're trying to show you what you need to know. The problem with them is that they don't usually use words, right? Anybody who's had an encounter with any kind of celestial vision, they don't usually use words. Words are a very, very low form of communication. So usually when you meet them in the non-physical, they're quite silent. People who've had visions of angels or Jesus or any of the Indian goddesses or whatever, they will usually remain silent because they don't want, the talking is useless to them. They speak in terms of feelings and thought projection. And in the book Autobiography of a Yogi, when Yogananda's guru dies and then comes back to him in another physical body, so physical that Yogananda says, like, I wrapped my arms around him and I didn't want to let go. He says, 50% of the conversation was through words and 50% of it was through thought transference, right? Words are a very, very poor form of communication. This is one of the reasons why I kind of object to when people say they have the divine word of God and it's never to be questioned. I mean, that to me is an egoic thing. Because if we take a sentence like this. Oops. Hopefully you can read that. I see, said the blind man, who then picked up a hammer and saw. If that's written in a holy text, how do you translate that? Does that mean that he was blind, but now he can see? Or does that mean he just picked up a hammer and a saw? Right? Words, by their very nature, are inaccurate. They just are. There's over 100 different translations of the Bhagavad Gita into English alone. How many different translations of the Bible are there? Right? There are words which exist in one language but don't exist in another. How do you translate that stuff? If this was the divine word of God, then there would be one translation, it would be perfect, and it would never be questioned because everybody would understand it. We can't even decide as a group of people within the same faith which interpretation is correct. Right? And then we fight wars about it. You got the Irish Catholics and the Irish Protestants. It's the same freaking thing. It's the same religion, but they're fighting and killing each other over this thing. You have fundamentalist Christians versus, whatever type of Christian. You have Muslims fighting each other. You have Jewish people fighting each other. You have Jews and Muslims fighting each other. You have everybody. It's when we start looking at something as being perfect in the Word, that's when we get into trouble. Okay? Words, by their nature, are inaccurate. Okay? It's the lowest form of communication. So what we want to do...
So I have...
Yeah.
Can I interrupt?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Like, you were explaining about the book from Mr. I forgot his name.
Robert Monroe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, you are the one who is explaining about his words, right?
Yeah.
So, like, from the faith I am, we have something similar.
Mm.
So the words came from God Almighty.
Yeah.
And the messenger
Yeah.
is there, but
Yeah.
the book can come like fall down on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the people can pick up the book and read. So but the messenger came along with, like you
Yeah.
are explaining right now, and he's the one who explained to the people
Yeah.
what those words are about.
Yeah. The problem is words are very, very inaccurate, as I mentioned, right? So what we want to do is we want to look here, or even better, we want to see how we feel about things, right? Because that will lead us closer to truth rather than words. Or we want to look at our experiences. I've had conscious out-of-body experiences. I've left my body. I know what it feels like. There isn't a single scientist in the world now who can tell me that that's not real, that doesn't exist. Because my experience is what guides me. Okay? Now, let's discuss this, okay? I'm going to talk about how guidance works from the non-physical world so that you can understand, right? Basically, the people who exist in the non-physical, your guides, as I mentioned, are there to support you. So they love to lie. So you have somebody like Edgar Casey, right? He was a sleeping prophet. He was somebody who went into a trance state and basically gave medical readings and past life readings and all that sort of stuff. Now his guides told him that Jesus was a virgin birth, he was born in a manger, blah blah blah, all that stuff that is typically known to be true from a Christian point of view. Okay? Now, somebody like, what's her name? Her name is Sylvia Brown, I think. I think that's the one that I'm thinking of. No, Sylvia Brown has a guide whose name is Francine. Okay, her guide has a name. Edgar Casey's, I think, had a name. I think it was an angel by the name of Halileel, but I'm not sure. Now, Brown's guide says that Jesus was born in an inn, not in a manger, and he was not a virgin birth, and all these other things, right? Now, Edgar Casey was a fundamentalist Christian. Okay, he had a lot of good work to do. He had medical readings and past life readings, and he really helped people understand that there was more than just the physical. Brown is doing the same work, but she's a Gnostic Christian who believes that Jesus survived the crucifixion and died in France. Okay? Now, if Edgar Casey was to receive word from his guides that Jesus was not a virgin birth, he could potentially question everything that his guides were telling him and shut down. And then all his work is lost. Sylvia Brown, again, is doing the same work, but is a fundamentalist, is a Gnostic Christian. So she's given the information that she needs, and Edgar Casey's given the information that he needs. And those two conflict. Jesus was either a virgin birth or he wasn't, right? It has to be one or the other. It can't really be both. So when I tell you that your choice is between love and ego, and you are guided in that choice, there's the tendency to receive word and move it right into the ego and say, I'm right because my guides in the non-physical told me that I'm right. Right? The other thing is, what I'm trying to do is get you out of the ego and move more towards source. And understand that if you receive guidance, that guidance is for you. It's subjective. This physical world right here that we live in, everything is subjective. Everything is relative. Einstein figured out that even time is relative, right? Time, motion, energy, all of that is relative, okay? If you get back way to the beginning of the universe itself, okay, 3 things had to exist. At the moment of the Big Bang, matter, or energy, because matter and energy are one and the same, time, and space. All 3 had to exist simultaneously. Without matter, there is no space, because where are you going to put it? Without matter and space, there's no time, because time is relative. First something is here, and then it's over there. The distance between that, we refer to as time. It was here, and then it was there, right? If there's only one thing that exists, and there's nothing else around, time does not exist, right? It can't. It has to be relative. Time is relative to something else. And if there's no other thing, then time doesn't exist, okay? So time is a byproduct of a physical universe. So everything that exists in here, in the non-physical, has no time. Now if you go into if you want to study this part, this, by the way, is well documented. We just refer to it as different things. I like to call it the astral realm. Some people have a stigma against that. When the Native Americans go to consult the Great Spirits, that's where they're going. When the Australian Aboriginals go into dream time, that's where they're going. They're going into a place beyond time, a place beyond space, where they can consult with non-physical entities that can give guidance. That's what they're doing, okay? Even in the book of Revelations, it starts off and says, I was in spirit on the Lord's day, and I turned. And then he sees this vision. That is a non-physical experience. John was sitting in a prison, and he was meditating, and he had a vision, an out-of-body experience. It has no relevance on physicality. The book of Revelations is neither here nor there. It's an astral vision. It doesn't have any relation to humanity. So if anybody tells you that the book of Revelations is the book of the end of time, it's not. It's a political piece to install fear into Christians so that they'll obey, right? Anything that moves you more towards fear is the opposite of where we're trying to get to, right? Your choice is love or ego, and ego believes in fear. Ego believes in separation. Ego believes in judgment and condemnation. Okay, you'll notice that a lot of religions are based around ego, right? They take the core message of what they experience, what the messenger has said, right? Every single religion has messengers who tell them what the truth is. And then the ego gets a hold of it and they distort it, distort the message. The message is always the same. With every master, with every messenger. They always tell you exactly the same thing. This is who you really are. That's all they tell you. But then we try and say that, well, I know who I really am and you don't. But it's all relative in the physical anyway. The only absolute is up here. So if you're trying to find absolute reality, you gotta go into the non-physical to do it. If you're trying to discuss who is right and wrong in here, things are only right or wrong relative to something else, right? So why get the ego involved in it, right? If your choice is, okay, so source, or God, or the universe, whatever you want to call it, is love, unity, compassion, truth. Okay. Ego is fear, separation, judgment, and falsehoods. And yet, the ego is always trying to tell you who you are. The ego has no idea who you are. Okay? We're not born with an ego. We create it as we go through life. You have grandchildren, you know what they're like. They don't have an ego. They're totally happy just to be. They're perfectly present and joyous and 100% full on, just pure. Doesn't mean that they don't get into fear and anger and all that other stuff too. Doesn't mean they don't cry. Doesn't mean they have those. That's all part of being physical.
So where do you put Satan in this picture?
Satan doesn't exist. Satan is fear. Satan is the opposite of God, right? It's the energy of separation. It's the fear and the loneliness and the separation and the despair that you feel when you feel disconnected. Okay, and I'll tell you, when I started going through the awakening process, yeah, this is all. You'll notice that, by the way, there's arrows going around. This is a constant cycle. Everything in the universe is constantly moving. Nothing ever stops, right? You freeze a particle to absolute zero, it still vibrates. You can't stop the universe from moving. Everything in the universe is cyclical. Okay? When winter ends, the universe doesn't end. It becomes spring and it continues, right? And so what's happening is we're constantly moving up and down, trying to find our way back home. Also trying to experience what we need to experience, right? So in here, when the mind creates the physical, when mind creates the body and decides to go into the physical, there's a forgetfulness process. It has to happen. Ignorance is part of the physical, otherwise you can't have a true experience, right? You can't, for example, feel fear. You can't feel disconnected if you know you're always connected, right? You can't feel grief, like the grief of losing a child, if you know nobody ever dies, right? Death is inconsistent with the laws of the universe. There's nothing on here that is death. There's nothing on here that is hell. There's nothing on here that is Satan. But fear exists. There are dark entities, dark places you can go, both internally as well as in the physical, as well as in the metaphysical. You can go to very, very dark places and they will feel like hell. You know, there's one of the teachers that I'm very amused by because he got most of it wrong, and I talked about it in the last one. What was his name? I can't remember the guy's name, but he wrote a book called, darn it, it escapes my mind. I'll come back to it. But he wrote a book where he did a muscle test, a kinesiological muscle test, to determine what he felt was absolute truth and what wasn't. And yet it was a subjective truth, and he didn't realize it, even though it was plainly obvious to anybody looking. So anyway, this particular author, who wrote a book called Power versus Force, and the author comes back to me, I'll tell you about it. But his mistake was thinking that that his muscle test was a measure of absolute truth. Well, in the physical universe, everything is subjective, right? Your muscle test, it works. People can test their muscles, and then they can find out whether, anything, whether you're drinking enough water or whatnot, right? I had a naturopath who did it to me, and he's like, you're not drinking enough water. It works, but it's a subjective experience, like everything else in this world. But so in the physical world, you have to understand that every experience is a subjective experience, and you choose the experience that you want to come to, you want to have when you come here. There was a kid, I think his name was they called him James the Pilot. He was like, when he was 2 years old, he was having dreams or nightmares, where he would wake up screaming and saying, the plane is crashing and the little man can't get out, right? And he never wanted to play with any toys but airplanes, and he was just obsessed with them. And he would have details about specific, I think, World War II planes, and he would be able to explain everything about them, even though nobody ever taught him that, right? And as it turns out, this kid, they believe, was a reincarnation of another pilot in World War II who went down in a plane crash. And they knew that, he knew details about the plane that he'd flown, everything about it, and they took him and they introduced him to some of the surviving members of the flight, or I mean of the squadron that he was on. And I think he was 6 years old at the time, and he greeted them all by name, and he knew all about the details about the planes and all this sort of stuff that you would have only known if you were in World War II. So the problem is that he remembers that when he's young, but as he gets older, it starts to fade. Okay, all of this is a process. This is the universe constantly moving and becoming. When you come into the physical, you forget everything you need to know. It's not like you're born and then you forget. This is why they want to say, life begins at conception, or life begins at birth, or life begins at whatever, right? It's like there's no definitive start or stop to any of it. It just keeps going. It's the process of becoming, right? The universe is in constant state of becoming. You are the end result of that which has come before, and the beginning part of that which is to come after. Okay? We're not finished. We're not like we're finished evolving. We still have a long way to go, and we're going to keep evolving until we get further on down the line. But it's up to us as to how we want to, how fast we want to get there. And the way that we're going to do that is by coming into the physical and having experiences and learning and then growing, right? The nature of the universe is expansion and growth, okay? Basically, experience, understanding, compassion, love. Okay? Experience leads to understanding, understanding leads to compassion, compassion leads to love, the soul knows itself, has a wonderful time, and then decides to go back and have some more experience. Again, cyclic, right? You are having an experience of a Muslim in this lifetime, and by all accounts, you're enjoying it, right? So, but in your next lifetime, maybe you want to come back as a Christian just to see what that's like. If you come into, I always love to use this example. If you come into existence, you want to see what you come in as rampantly homophobic, right? Next lifetime, you say, when you reemerge into the non-physical, you say, "Whoa, that was a hell of an experience. Let's see what it's like to be on the other end of it." And then you come back and you're a gay person in a homophobic family. Then you get a full experience, right? Nothing is good or bad, right? If you see somebody and they do not have compassion and they do not have love in their heart, it's because they haven't had enough experiences yet to garner the understanding, to have compassion, to return to love, right? That's why there's no good or bad experiences. Everything is just an experience leading you to growth. So you can't begrudge anybody for the experience they're having. I speak out vocally about the dogma in religions, and the dogma in science, and the dogma in spirituality. I'm very, very vocal about what I believe is accurate and what isn't. But it's neither here nor there. It doesn't matter to me. You can believe whatever you want. You don't have to believe me. If you don't want to believe me, that's fine. I don't care. What I want you to do is have your experience. I want to support you in that experience, whatever that is. That was the moment that I started to feel unconditional love. Especially, yes?
According to this theory, if I'm subjugated by, like, the Hindu religion, their caste system religion,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
If I'm a lower caste or the lowest caste person, and I'm subjugated by the highest caste people, and I believe in this or view as a Brahmin,
Okay.
highest caste, you are preaching this thing, and making me feel good about it that in this life this is your fate.
No.
You wanted to experience the subjugation, right?
Nope, that's not what I'm saying.
You are made to serve me in this
Nope.
life.
It's not
If you
what-
serve me good, the next life you
No.
will be
let's
So
talk,
that's what's going on
let's talk about
in
Hinduism.
1 billion people in India.
Let's talk about Hinduism for a second,
Yeah.
okay? Where I believe the Indian religions, the Eastern religions go wrong is that they believe in good karma and bad karma, okay? They believe that there's a way off the hamster wheel. This is cyclical. There's no end to it. There's no way off the hamster wheel. When you become awakened, when you become enlightened, you don't finish the game, right? They say if you have good karma, you go up. If you have bad karma, you go down. If you go down far enough, you become an animal. Well, if you're already a human being, if you're a human soul, what purpose is there to be had in being as a dung beetle? Okay? There's no purpose to it. It doesn't do anything. Okay? So your incarnation is as a physical human being. That is your chain. Okay? You want there to be, the thing that I struggled with for a while was trying to figure out what was good and bad karma. Okay? And then I realized there is no good or bad karma. There's just experience. It is whatever you want to make of it. Now, I'm not arguing for or against anything. You can have anything. I'm not saying that anybody is greater or less than anybody else. You are what you are. The goal is to return to love, which I just erased, right? And when you have love in your heart, when you are fully awakened, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are. I've told my wife, it doesn't matter at this stage of my evolution. It doesn't matter whether I live in a big house or a small house or under a bridge. It makes no difference to me. In the Gita it says, essentially, when you fully awaken, a rock and mud and gold are the same. And I can tell you that's true. It doesn't make any difference to me. I don't care one way or the other. If I'm rich, I'm rich. If I'm poor, I'm poor. It doesn't make any difference. Right? I told my wife when I experienced this, I said, my love for you has no condition. I don't have any condition for you. You can be or do or say or be whatever you want. I support you entirely, fully, in exactly whatever you want. I want you to be the best version of you. I will communicate with you. I will tell you what I'm experiencing, but I'm not requiring you to do, say, or be anything. Right? There's a wonderful biblical passage. If you want to understand what it's like to be here, this is the one that they use in all the wedding ceremonies. It's from 1 Corinthians, right? Love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever truth wins out. Love never gives up. Love never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Well, if the fundamental foundation of every religion and every spiritual experience is then God and love are one and the same. You can invert that. Yes, Sam?
From the same Bible.
Yes.
I think it's in Old Testament. I forget about the reference, but
Yeah.
it's like thy God is the jealous God.
Yeah, well,
So thou shalt not make any graven image
Yeah.
similar to under the sea.
this is why I'm saying words are horribly inaccurate, right? Anybody who's had a spiritual experience of any of the higher realms will come back and tell you that God is love. Anybody who moves into the highest states of vibration will tell you. They'll come back with a feeling of love and peace and beauty. They will not come back with anything that says God is vengeful and wrathful. That's ego. That's pure ego, and God does not have an ego. So if we read this again, God is patient and kind. God is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. God does not demand his own way. Well, what happens to the Ten Commandments? Right? If God never demands his own way, if the state of being loving does not demand its own way, there are no rules you have to follow. God is freedom. The freedom to choose to be, do, or say whatever you want to do. Whether it's in the physical or the metaphysical. There are consequences. If you kill somebody, it's the law of cause and effect. If you kill somebody, if you hurt somebody, that you're going to experience the effect of that. but there is no judgment. There is no condemnation in the afterworld. There is no afterworld to speak of. It's all one thing. It's all part of one system. There are no rules. We have full freedom to play, to do whatever we want. Now, that's why I can look at somebody who I vehemently disagree with. People who are racist and homophobic and sexist and misogynistic and all those wonderful things that I disagree with personally, that I would never do, and say, I bless you, go on your way, have your experience. I support you in your experience. Now, in the book Conversation with God, they talk a lot about highly advanced beings in other parts of the universe. And one of the things they say is, well, what happened, or Neil Donald Walsh, the author, says, well, what would happen if somebody tried to kill a highly advanced being? Well, then a highly advanced being would simply just lay down his life because he knew he'd get another body, because death doesn't exist. When you have an out-of-body experience, people who have near-death experiences, they all come back fundamentally changed. They realize that death doesn't exist. Because I'm standing out here watching the doctors perform CPR, and my body's over there. Well, if the body's over there, and I'm over here, then I'm not dead. There is no death. When you physically leave your body, you know there is no death. Death is inconsistent with the laws of the universe. This body is created by thought. Thought is energy. Okay? So there's no reason to kill anybody or hurt anybody. That's all ego. You can't kill anybody anyway. You can end their physical incarnation, but so what? Just going to have another incarnation anyway. Right? It's all killing, all death, all destruction is based out of the ego. All of it. Any sense of superiority, that's all ego. And that is the antithesis of God. That is the antithesis of Source. Anytime you want to make a decision, you ask yourself one question. Is this love or is this ego? It's the only question you have to ask. And that will put you on the right path. Now, right and wrong is entirely subjective, right? You can have whatever experience you want. If you want to choose ego, you go right ahead. I don't care. It's less fun to me to choose ego over love. I'd rather be loving. I'd rather, try and see things without judgment, without condemnation. I don't really want to judge people. It lowers my energy. I like my energy high, right? The hardest times for me is when I'm dealing with my kids, because they're not always perfectly well-behaved angels, and it's very easy to have your energy lowered, because I recognize that when I do that, that's my ego. I want to go to bed because I'm tired, and my kid wants to read stories or play on the phone or do whatever he wants to do. So it's my expectation that is not being met, and that's my expectation, the expectation that I brought into the relationship, right? What we're doing is we're in the physical to experience things in relationship to everything else, right? That's why everything in the physical is relative. Because if it wasn't relative, you couldn't have the experiences you have. You know yourself as a Muslim because of atheists and Christians and all that other stuff. You know yourself as a theist by knowing atheists. You know yourself as a Gnostic by knowing agnostics. You know yourself as being from a particular country because of the neighboring country, right? Everything is relative. You know yourself as a woman by understanding men. You understand yourself as straight by knowing gay, right? There's no good or bad in any of it. There's no good or bad in God's universe. It's all morally neutral. If you want to pray 5 times a day, if you want to keep your head covered, if you want to go to synagogue, if you want to go to church, if you don't want to do any of that, it's all up to you, right? If it brings you joy, if it brings you peace, if it brings you higher into love, great. And even if it doesn't, that's great too, because that's nothing more than an experience. I'm having the experience of feeling separated from God. Great. Good for you. I fully support that. If you want to get out of it, come talk to me. I'll let you know. Right? So you choose all the experiences that you go through. You choose the major things that you want to come into this incarnation and experience. So if there's no time in here, in the non-physical, right, then your higher self is constantly, or it has time opened up to them to figure out exactly where they want to go, right? So as human beings, we like to think of time as linear. It's like an arrow, it does that, right? In the non-physical, there is no time. So we think of ourselves as coming in, if we believe in reincarnation, which you should, but you don't have to. You think, oh, well, I come down here in the year 500. Then I come down here in the year 700. And then I come down here in the year 900. And then I come down here in the year 2000, whatever, right? That's how we think of it. We think of this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, okay? That's not how it works. Time does not exist in the non-physical. When you're discussing past lives, and there's no such thing as a past life, by the way. That's one of the terminologies that kind of annoys me, because it's all one life. When you go throughout your life, right? You wake up in the morning, you go through life, and then at the end of the day, you go to sleep. There's a period of time when you're asleep, and then you wake up the next day, and you do something else. Maybe on this day you go to the gym. Maybe on this day you go to work. Did you exist in that time when you were asleep? Of course you did, right? Your life is this. It's a series of days connected by periods of unconsciousness. That's what your lives are, right? You are immortal. You have no beginning or no end. You are energy. You are the source. All of it is connected. Your past lives are really more like this. Like a giant bowl of spaghetti. It's one life. It's all happening simultaneously. And the funny thing is, if you were to stretch that out on a time frame, you would have one incarnation here, and one incarnation here, and occasionally you'll run into yourself. Another version of yourself. That's when people experience that sense of knowing somebody, like you've known them your entire life, like there's just something about them that just instantly clicks and connects, it's because you're recognizing yourself. It happens once in a while. Doesn't happen all the time, but it happens once in a while. Okay? Your life is not a linear event, and it's not one lifetime. It's all of them simultaneously. So when all of time is open up to you, right? Sorry. Time is, in linearity, time is an arrow that goes one way. Okay? Your soul exists up here. It can choose any time along this timeline to go into physical. So if you ever wonder why you incarnated here, it's because your soul and your individuated personality, that which is you think of as you in the non-physical, decided this particular moment is the time you wanted to come in for the maximum growth. Because this provides you the most opportunity. I want to be a Muslim in America in 2018. I want to see what that's like. I want to be a black person in America in the 1960s, or basically any time in their history. Right? You have those options. Your soul and you all work in concert with your guides and everybody. They all decide where you're going to go along. It doesn't matter whether this is, you don't have to be born in 1970, and then the next one is, 2050. Does not have to be a linear process. Yes, Sam?
Why would I like to come down on earth as like a crippled person with no legs?
Okay.
Or like my tongue is not working and I have to use sign language and
Okay.
maybe without eyes.
Okay.
But for 60, 70, 80 years of miserable life, why would I choose?
Why would you choose that?
Yeah.
So there's a couple things. Number one, first off, nothing is ever miserable except in your physical egoic sense, right? That is.
But if you
but
ask
that's
100 of
but
those
that's
kind of people, they are suffering, right?
no. There's no suffering in the non.
And from our point of view,
in the
it's not
physical,
right.
yes. But you have to again. You have to forget who you are so that you can have that experience of being limited in your capacity, right? Now, if you've always been able-bodied, right, you might decide, I don't know what it's like to be physically or mentally handicapped. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it feels like to have to deal with a world that doesn't accept me. I don't know what it's like to feel like I'm trying to deal with a world that is made for people who are 6 feet tall and I'm only 3'6". Right? I don't know what it's like to be in a world where people walk everywhere or drive everywhere and I'm stuck in this wheelchair and I can't go anywhere. Right? So that's one thing. You could have those experiences. So in Brenda's family, okay, there's a set of twins. One is able-bodied and normal and wonderful and sweetest girl you've ever known. Okay? The other one is somebody with some mental difficulties. Okay? Now, I don't know, do you know what the condition is?
She's got cerebral palsy.
Cerebral palsy. Okay. But she can't communicate. But if you look at her, she's there. She's. You can see if you look into her eyes, she is there, right? And this able-bodied girl, her twin, said, keeps complaining. She says, my emotions are so strong. I don't know why my emotions are so strong. Like it bothers me that I feel things so deeply. Like I'm not in her body. I don't know what she means by strong. It could be just regular emotions. It could be that they're stronger than anybody else, than most other people. And I was thinking about that, and I got an insight, and I get these from time to time. And the insight that I got from that, and I knew it was insight because I always get a powerful burst of emotion right in the solar plexus, right in the heart chakra. And actually, that's how I met you. I'm just to digress. I had powerful, one of those moments that I know is a message from Source. And it said, I really need to post something on Craigslist. And so as soon as I could, within like half an hour, I posted a list on Craigslist. Anybody want spiritual help? Let me know. I'm more than happy to talk about it. Sam was the only one who answered. Right? And now Sam and I are great friends, and he teaches me about Islam, things that I don't know about. Right? I interpret it through my filter, and he probably doesn't like that. But
I'm also learning a lot.
yeah. So, but in this particular case, the insight that I got was that she knew that this girl with cerebral palsy knew she was going to come into the physical and be challenged. She knew her life would be very difficult. She knew that she would not be able to speak. She knew that she was going to have trouble navigating the world. And you agreed to come into this world with her as her guide, to be her voice, to speak for her. And I said that to her. And she said, yeah, that's probably right. I said, that's why your emotions are so high, because you need to be able to speak to her on a feeling level, because she can't use words. So she said, yeah, that's right. So when you have those things, when sometimes people come into physicality, people who are highly spiritual, or entities that are highly spiritual, people who are highly advanced, they agree to come in either to allow other people to have the experience to deal with them. These people in this family really want to know what it's like to have to care for somebody unconditionally who is physically disabled or mentally disabled or whatever. I'll go in there. I'll take that body. I'll do that for them because I love them and they're my soul family, right? So sometimes it's because a more spiritual entity agrees to help somebody else out. Other times it's because somebody wants to go in voluntarily to say, I want to have this limiting experience. Can you go with me? Right? And that happens all the time. Right? So there's no good or bad. There's no, it's an experience. And this is what I'm trying to get through. This was one of the hardest things for me to realize is that there is no good or bad. Nothing. It's all ego if you're thinking of things as good or bad. Right? Your ego is trying to tell you who it thinks you are. And the ego is wrong 100% of the time. Because the ego is in opposition to Source. And Source is truth. So the ego is always wrong. Whenever you encounter something and you feel like it's the ego talking, you are wrong. You are making an incorrect assessment. Right? Wrong in the sense that that's not a sourceful response. Right? You always have the choice to choose between love or ego. that's, if everybody made that decision, this is actually a good time to talk about, what time is it? We're getting there. What I call the formula for world peace. This is the art of creation. And if you've ever listened to Abraham-Hicks and she talks about the law of attraction, kind of the same thing. This, as I said in my last one, this is law of attraction. This is all just attraction, attraction, attraction. Okay? So basically, the universe is made like this. Okay, there's 4 fundamental laws, or fundamental forces. Gravity, electromagnetism, strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. Okay? Gravity, we know what gravity is. Electromagnetism, we know what electromagnetism is. Strong nuclear force holds the nucleus of an atom together. Weak nuclear force holds the molecules together. Okay? There's also, so basically gravity, what is it? It pulls large objects together, right? So you got planets, they're pulled together, planets and moons, they all stay in orbit because of gravity. It's an attraction field. Electromagnetism. Magnetism is is an attraction field. Strong nuclear force is an attraction field. Weak nuclear force is an attraction field. It's strongest law right there. Like attracts like. Like energy attracts like energy. Strongest law up there, law of attraction. Okay? Attractor field, attractor field. This entire universe, all of creation is based around attraction, not imposition. People don't force things on you. Okay? You attract them based on your energy. You got large objects, medium objects, tiny little objects, spiritual objects. Okay? All of it is based around attraction. All of it. This is a universe of attraction. So if any physicists want to talk to me, the grand unified theory that they're looking for, that's it. Attraction. We used to think that electricity and magnetism were 2 separate things, and we realized it's all one thing. We used to think that gravity was a separate thing. Now we know that it's a function of space-time. So space-time and gravity are all one thing. So eventually, we're going to find out that all of this is one thing. The more you examine this, the more you examine you, who you really are, you realize that all things are one thing. There's no separation between any of it. It's variations on a theme. It's all based on attraction. So if you think that God hates you, that God is punishing you, that things are being pushed on you, that you're being forced to come into this life as punishment, it is not. It is an attraction. It is what you chose to bring to yourself.
But in this
Yes.
life, like the practical thing is that we always try to avoid hardship or
Hardship is based in the ego.
or bad experiences.
Bad experience are based in the ego.
Hard experiences. Right? We try to learn from others' mistakes and avoid
Yeah.
our own bad experiences, like how we drive, how we behave, how we react. So we always try to avoid, to not to have bad experiences, hardships. Right?
Okay.
Then like in this practical 50, 60, 70, 80 years of life, most of the human beings, they try to avoid that. Right? Then why we will go for it in the life, like when we will go up there again, I will choose
Why would we choose to come back again?
to come back and have bad experience or hardship.
Okay.
Like
Because
right now,
every
we will
experience,
always avoid the hardship, right?
every experience
Yeah.
that you have is brought to you for growth. Period, full stop, end of story, turn out the lights, close the door on the way out. Okay? That's it. There's no good or bad. It's an experience for growth. So this law of attraction, if you take two planets with enough gravity, right, and they're circling each other, eventually they come in and they'll collapse, right? All the particles in the universe, they all will eventually collide and create more matter and all that sort of jazz, right? So all this stuff is just things being attracted to other things, okay? There is no good or bad in it. The universe is morally neutral, okay? If you want to have an experience, great, have that experience. If you want to say that this is morally good or morally bad, that's your own egoic judgment. There's no judgment in the universe. You know, the universe does not judge whether the sun is 12% too hot or not. The sun is what the sun is. The flower is what the flower is. There's no judgment in that. It's our own egoic judgment that says, this is good, this is bad. This is morally superior, this is morally inferior, right? There's none of that. So basically, if you want to consciously create a better life, one that, for example, you say, well, in my life, I want to bring more peace and more love and all that sort of stuff, right? You need to understand the formula for that.
But you give two exceptions for that.
What?
Like the rapist, you accepted that as a, you didn't count that as an experience.
No, that's an experience.
Into that bad category, right?
No. What I'm saying is that that's a lower energy. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's like saying, you know, grade 1 is worse or is bad and grade 10 is good. It's not. It's morally neutral, right? Is an orange good or bad? Well, it's subjective. It depends if you like oranges or not.
So where will you put a person who is rapist?
Well, I'm not
Or
going to.
he is like a habitual rapist.
I'm not going to put him anywhere. I'm going to put him as somebody who is seeking an experience. That's all. Right? It's again, I'm trying to bust your ego a little bit. I'm trying to bruise it a little bit, because what we experience in life, ego is great for, you know, hey, look at this great building that I created that can house all these orphans. Or here's this great building I created so that I can overcharge people for rent. The building is the building, right? It depends on what the ego decides to make of it, right? The building is morally neutral. It depends on what you decide you want to do, right? So when you're trying to create something, you want to, it's I plus D plus, sorry, I plus D, actually we're going to change that, plus B minus R equals A. That's my math, that's the only math I know. So this is intent plus desire plus belief minus resistance equals attraction. Okay? So you have to intend for something to be there. You have to desire it with as much desire as you can have. You have to believe that it's possible. And then you have to eliminate resistance, and that'll bring it towards you. That's how attraction works. Okay? The whole universe, and I know that people will argue with me, but the entire universe is conscious, because the entire universe is God. Right? So all the little particles, everything that's created, is all done through intent and desire and belief. It's a conscious entity that, you know, we call God. Right? It's hard to think of little tiny particles floating through the air, but there's not a speck of dust out of place in the universe. Not one. Everything is there by purpose and intent. The hardest part that people have is this part. People, and sometimes people struggle with whether something is possible or not. Okay? Your goal is not to create world peace, although this formula will work for world peace. Your goal is to figure out what you want in your life and create that. Now, in my life, I want to create more love. I want to create more joy. And the way that we do that is by moving out of ego and towards love. That's my formula. Every time I'm confronted with ego, I get rid of it and I choose love. Okay? Now, the hardest thing that people have is the resistance. Because as Abraham-Hicks will tell you, it's kind of like, you have a train with its little train cars here, and those are your goals and desires, and you put one engine at this end that is going in this direction, that's your desire, and then you have another engine on this end that is going that way, and that's your resistance. And they fight, and it just does this. It doesn't do anything. That's why people go nowhere in their lives. Okay? What you got to do is you either have to add a new train car to this side or a bunch of train cars so that you can overpower this one. So that one doesn't have as much of an effect. You just drag it along. Doesn't matter. You just overpower the resistance. That's why people who tell you, like motivational gurus, just go, go, go. That's one way of doing it. You don't have to get rid of the resistance, but it's easier if you just eliminate that one, and then you can move that way faster. Okay? The way to remove resistance is ego. So get rid of that and move love in there. Intent plus desire plus belief plus love equals attraction. If you want to create anything in your life, easiest way to do it for me might be different for you. Easiest way for me is to go into meditation, clear my mind, set my intention, set my desire, know that it's possible, love it with every piece, every fiber of my being, and I know that it'll happen. Now, that being said, if I want a dragon, probably not going to happen in the physical, right? It would be cool if I could. You could create it in the non-physical, no problem, but the physical is subject to the laws of physics. Dragons don't exist in the physical because they're against the laws of physics. This is done by the laws of metaphysics. You can create whatever you want in there. Just there's limitations in here by our very nature. Because if we had full access to our power in the physical, this would be a very dangerous place. Look at the damage that the ego has caused in this world. And imagine if we had full access to our power. How bad this world would be. We have to evolve out of our ego first. And then we get the access to greater abilities and greater powers. It's like giving a 3-year-old keys to the car. It's not going to happen. Okay? My kid has to be 16 years old before he even thinks about driving a car. Right? Because he's not mature enough at 5 years old to figure out the workings of a car. We are children. We are immature children who cannot get past our ego. We still think that our religion is superior than somebody else's religion. That I believe in science and not religion, so therefore I'm superior to all the religionists. They believe in fairy tales. I believe in science. I believe that my particular version of my religion is better and superior to somebody else's. It's not. It's a different path. All roads lead to Rome. My favorite piece in the Bhagavad Gita is a simple line. The Bhagavad Gita, if you're not familiar with it, is a conversation between Krishna, the divine incarnation of God, and Arjuna, the spiritual seeker. And Krishna says, all roads, Arjuna, lead to me. It doesn't say the road of the Hindu. It doesn't say the road of the believer. It doesn't say anything about the road of the faithful or the worthy. All roads, every single one, full stop. There is no wrong path that you can choose. There's no way you can mess up this game. Every experience that you're having is for growth. And every road leads back to source. Even the path of the atheist. Hate to break it to him. Yes?
I really like this formula, the attraction one. My question is, the personal experience, how much depends on this attraction formula? How much depends on the soul plan? For example, I really want to be U.S. president, and I really use this formula.
Yeah.
I want to attract this experience to be U.S. president. It turned out my soul plan for me is a Canadian farmer.
Yeah.
So no matter how strong I have this intention, desire, belief, how less I have the resistance, I still
Yes.
will be the Canadian farmer.
So there's a couple. That's a very valid question. Very valid question. It's something that everybody has. Remember, the physical. There's limitations by design. okay? You can believe all you want to be Prime Minister of Canada or President of the United States, but there's only one every couple of years, and odds are you're not gonna be it, okay? Every team wants to win their particular championship. Only one is gonna win, okay? So the universe doesn't respond to, first off, the universe doesn't respond to your thoughts. It responds to your vibration, okay? So you might want to be a leader. That's what your goal is, right? Then you can be a leader. You can be a healer. You can be an artist. You can do all sorts of things, but it might not be exactly the way you want it. The universe is designed to surprise and delight you. These people in the non-physical and your spirit and your soul are all working to give you the best experience for you, for your own growth, okay? And that might not be president, okay? You might really want to be it, but, you know, that's fine. The other thing that you have to remember is that, you know, I think Conversation with God points out very well. God says, every prayer is eventually answered. And you say, well, how can that be? If I pray that my dad is on his, who's on his deathbed, doesn't die, and then he dies, what are you telling me that every prayer is answered? I prayed that he wouldn't die, and he died, right? Well, first off, death is inconsistent with the laws of the universe, so that's the easiest prayer to answer. You don't have to do anything. It's like, okay, he's not dead, great, never died. But you know, you have to stop thinking of yourself in terms of this one being, this one physical incarnation that lasts, you know, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years, whatever it is, right? What you're doing, Abraham-Hicks probably explains it way better than I could, where she says, you know, everything that you have is every thought that you think. Thoughts are things, and every thought that has ever existed still exists right here in the non-physical. It's stored in something called what people call the Akashic records. Okay, this is where psychics go when they give you a reading. They tune into the Akashic field for you and give you the information that is best suited towards you. So if you get a past life reading, it's accurate for you, but it may not be entirely accurate because they like to lie, right? It's just whatever's supportive for you. So if you're struggling, you can go to see a past life reader, and I have, and the information they gave me was very supportive. But was it accurate? I don't know. Works for me, right? This system works for me. Doesn't work for you, throw it away. Find something else, right? So when you think of yourself as this person who lives this long, and I say, I want a red sports car. Red, because it's my favorite car, red Tesla. Okay? Well, if I'm 70 years old and I'm going to die at 72, I might not get that red Tesla in this lifetime, right? But if this is the days of your life and you say, today I'm going to go to the gym, and then you get busy and you don't get to the gym, go to sleep, go to the gym the next day, right? So what? You didn't do it on Monday, you do it on Tuesday. You want a red sports car, you don't get it before the end of your life, do the next one, if it's that important to you. So what they do, you have to remember that everything that you have, all the thoughts that you think, all the desires that you have, it all gets stored in your Akashic records, okay? And so what you're doing is you're just filling this thing up with everything you can think of, everything that you want, everything that you desire. Maybe one of them is to be the US president, okay? And then you follow, or then you kick the bucket, and you have that experience in the non-physical, which is like the dreaming experience when you're during days of your life, right? You reach into this grab bag and you say, okay, being US president is super important to me. I really, really, really want that experience, right? You say, okay, cool. I think I want to be US president, okay? And then your guides and your angels go, do you really want to be US president? Or is it more important that you be a leader in your community? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to learn from this? What are you trying to grow from this? Do you want to be US president? Is that specifically what you want? Or is it more that I want to influence people? I want to be able to help people in my country, right? And you say, no, you're right, I actually don't necessarily want to be US president. Take that one out. I want to be just a leader. I really want to influence people. I say, okay, great. So here you go. Now you're somewhere in China being a great business leader and a philanthropist, right? Whatever you want. You might decide, if I decide today I want a red Tesla, and then they stop making Teslas or they stop making red Teslas, I'll be, okay, well, get a black one then. So what? Or get a electric Lamborghini or whatever I want, right? You know, it doesn't matter. The outcome is not necessarily the thing. If you want a specific outcome, does that sound like love or ego?
Ego.
Right. So what does it matter? See, the whole purpose of this formula that I gave you is to show you that ego is nowhere in that formula. Ego does not create. It can, but it doesn't really create as well. It's a little trickier, it's harder, and quite frankly, it's not as fulfilling. I would rather be surprised and delighted by how well things are going and how the universe is treating me, right? I would rather wake up every morning and go, let's see what amazing things are going to happen today, rather than, let's check the polls today and see if I'm president. Oh, crap, I'm not the president. Now I'm depressed, right? So when I create something, I'm completely indifferent to the outcome. I want I desire the outcome. If I say, you know, if I want a red Tesla, great. I've set my intention, I've set my desire. I love red Teslas. Actually, I would rather have a black one, but that's just me. But I'm completely indifferent to the outcome. If I get it, I get it. Great. If I don't, I don't. No big deal.
I'm not relating these two analogies. The reason is, okay, if I want to go to gym on Monday,
Yeah.
and due to whatever reason I'm not doing, and then I went to sleep,
Yeah.
and next day when I woke up, I know, oh, yesterday I wanted to go to gym.
Yeah.
Let's get ready.
Yeah.
Okay. No overtime, no nothing, I have to go to gym today. And I've intentionally, with full conscious, I fulfilled my yesterday's desire today. Right?
Yeah.
While in the system below, I don't remember. I don't remember I wanted to have a red Tesla, right?
Well, but
So how will we,
Well, do you
how will I
rem-
enjoy
do you
the-
remember
the,
ev-
the thing? Like,
Do you remember every day of your life? Do you remember what you had for breakfast on June 26, 1998?
No.
Right. So you don't have to remember everything. You just need to know that you had breakfast that day, probably. Right? Your needs were met. Your needs are always 100% met. There's not a damn thing in this world that you need. If you need it, you have it. Period. Full stop. End of story.
There are
So-
major things, major
Yes.
setbacks,
Yes.
major setbacks and major achievements and major desires, which
Okay.
are always like, okay, on that day, I got married, right?
Yeah.
I got divorced, I got a first baby.
Yeah.
Or the things like this. I was longing for that and it happened.
Yeah.
So these kind of major things, at least, which we wanted to remember,
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
in this life. But in the life system,
Yes.
which was down at the bottom,
Yeah.
we don't remember anything.
Yeah, you do. You do. You just don't know you do. Right? So let's say there's an example that in one of the Edgar Cayce books where two people I think they killed each other on the battlefield. Or in previous incarnations, they fought each other quite a bit. And one of them in the fight cut somebody between the thumb and forefinger. Right? In the current incarnation, they were college students, college roommates together. And when they would fight, and they would fight like cats and dogs, not on the battlefield, but verbally and as roommates do. And when he got really angry, that scar would reappear. Right? You know, if you are dealing with issues with somebody in this physical lifetime, that is something that either, especially if you don't know the source of it, if somebody you just feel antagonistic towards for some reason you can't figure out why, it's probably from a past life. And you should resolve that. You have your own intuition, your own guidance inside you, always. You have everything you need. This system, learning about this is all within you. All you have to do is just go inside. Yes, Trish.
Can I just make a response to?
No, I'm not gonna start over.
Not a response, but like an addition.
Sure.
Because like, when we put things out there, when we want things, it's energy.
Yeah.
And light is energy, and when a ray of light is going, it's continuous, right? It never stops until it hits something, and then it goes in another direction, but it never stops. So the same thing with our ideas and our thoughts and our wants and our wishes, I think is the same. We put it out there and it's continuous, and it's something that you draw towards you.
If you need to remember something, you will. You will either have a flash of insight, you'll be like, this guy that I feel antagonistic to, it's like I feel like I'm just fighting him like we're Roman warriors and and you'll get that insight and you'll know. And it might come to you as a metaphor, as an analogy, but you will know. Likewise, like I said, if you look at somebody and you're like, I feel like I've known you my entire life, like I don't know how, but I know. That's your energies colliding and giving you impressions. And if you don't get something as obvious as that, you will be led. Everybody in this room right now is here because they attracted this to them. This is the fulfillment of everything that they've been attracting and the beginning of everything that will come after. It's all part of the process. There's no beginning and there's no end, right? This would not take place if you guys weren't here. You are part of the process. I'm part of the process. The best part of this process, the thing that amuses the crap out of me, is that I am up here in a position of superiority, separate from you, telling you there is no such thing as superiority and there is no separation. That makes me laugh like you wouldn't believe. Because all of this is one thing. It's all part of one process. And this is where science goes wrong. Science wants to think of things in a linear A causes B, causes C, causes D, causes E, in a linear progression, like a bunch of billiard balls. One hits the next one hits the next one. It's not. It's everything feeding in and becoming. Okay? I could not draw this on the chalkboard or on the whiteboard if this pen didn't exist. That pen has a story in and of itself. This whiteboard has a story in itself. Multiple things had to come into creation for this to be here, and for the easel to be here, and for this room to be here, and for you to be here. This is not a singular linear process. This is a creative process of everything happening all at once. You are part of that process. The experience that you are having is exactly designed perfectly for you. There is not a speck of dust out of place in this universe, period. Everything is happening for you and by you. If you did not make the choice to be in this room today, you would be having a different experience, and that one would be perfect for you. Everybody who is not here today is having the experience that is designed exactly for them. And none of it is good or bad. It's exactly what you make of it. One of the things that really helped me in my job, and Trish knows my job, she works for me, is the realization that everybody, full stop, is doing their best at every moment. And because they cannot meet my expectations, that's my expectations. That's my ego that's coming into it saying that you are not good enough. That's me as a sense of entitlement and superiority saying that I'm better than you. That is ego. There is no person who is better than anybody else. Period. Everybody is just different. The bluebird is not superior to the redbird. There's no such thing as superiority.
I would like to vote for you.
So, but this is what I'm saying, right? I'm trying to bruise your ego. I'm trying to tell you that your religion is incorrect. that your scientific understanding is incorrect, that your spiritual understanding is incorrect. Because I want you to challenge your beliefs. I want you to challenge your fundamental structure of your brain and your mind and realize your potential. You know, one of the things that I talked about in my last talk was about the nature of the soul. And that the soul is not contained within the body. That the body is contained within the soul. It's a downwards process. It's like God, the soul, the metaphysical body, and then the physical body. It's a tightening. It's a lowering of vibration. So when we understand that the body existed within the soul, now we can do crazy cool things like create a second body out of the same energy of the soul, right? People have done that. It's rare, but it's real. It's called bilocation. Many people, not many people, but people do it, right? When you realize that you are energy, you can do things like Joseph of Cupertino did and St. Francis of Assisi did, where they would levitate in divine states because they're vibrating up here and the physical body just kind of goes along with it, right? So if you can create a second body, right, that is fully independent of your first one, what happens to death? What happens to old age? What happens to sickness?
It's non-existent.
If you realize who you really are and your power, your inherent power, your inherent ability, you can create worlds. This is why Abraham-Hicks says we have the power to create worlds. We do. But we think our soul is a little tiny thing inside right here. And that when we get a smudge on it, when we do something bad, God gets mad at us. And we should feel repentant and we should feel guilty. That limits our capacity. That limits our understanding. What I want to do is I want to shake people to their core. I want to show them who they really are. Because there's magic in it. There is such a creative force within you you do not realize. When you get trapped in the ego, you think the world is out to get you. You think that you're a victim. That's this part. The victim emotions. You are not a victim. You are a creator. All of this is the creative process of us, of the universe becoming, of God becoming. This is why I give these talks. Because this is God's work we're doing. God cannot be without us. Whatever we are, whatever we create, is part of Him.
Mhm.
And it is joyous, and it is beautiful, and it is loving. And when you get there, when you awaken to who you are in such a profound state of love, you can't even contain it within your body. There are times when I have to pull over and cry because I can't talk, I can't speak, I can't move, I can't drive, I can't focus. I just have to be in that state because it is so powerful. And you cannot contain all of who you are within your physical body. You cannot do it. The awakened ones, like Buddha is said to have feel like his bones were being broken. The story of Jesus is that he sweat blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. Right? I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't know what Buddha was feeling. But considering when you awaken and the vibrational power you have to be able to do the things that Jesus was able to do, that Buddha was able to do, Buddha walked on the sky. People don't talk about it because Buddha is not all about miracles. Jesus is all about miracles. But he did the same things. I talked to you about this, Muhammad's night journey. Muhammad's night journey was an astral journey. It's a metaphysical, non-physical journey. But when he said that he was meditating and he heard the word of God, of course he did. That's what happens when you clear the mind. You align yourself with source, you eliminate resistance, and now you can hear. It's like tuning in a radio. People have done it, people will do it, and more people will do it as we awaken. Every single master comes with the same message. I am you. The things that I can do, you can do. And then the ego gets a hold of it and says, Jesus was the special one. Muhammad was the special one. Buddha was the special one. And we can try, but we'll never be as good as them. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true. You have so much power within you. You are not a victim. You are here by choice, by design, and with love, and with guidance and support.
Who can persuade those people who have suffered from very severe lifelong disease or like a very big accident, those people to tell them, okay, this is you attracted everything, and this is the God's plan for you. You deserve
Don't.
that.
Don't.
How would
Don't.
persuade those people?
You're not here to tell people what they shouldn't be or shouldn't be. You're here to support people in their journey and love them unconditionally. That means whatever they want for the best version of themselves that they can be, that's what they should be.